I took a planned break from work to recover from burnout. What I didn't expect was how quickly friends and family decided I was wasting my life and falling behind. People say burnout creeps up on you, that it is slow, like a tide rising. That was not how it happened for me. For me, it snapped. It was Tuesday morning. I was standing in the middle of my kitchen, holding a spoon, staring into a bowl of cereal I had already eaten. I was not late for work. I was just still there. Fully dressed, laptop open on the counter, headset around my neck, and I could not remember if I had logged in or not. My hands were shaking. Not from coffee. I had not had any yet. Something inside just gave out. I set the spoon down and said it out loud. I am done. I had been at the same job for nearly 14 years. Middle management, tech company, decent title that looked better on paper than in reality. The kind of work that fills your calendar, but never your life. I had been reliable, good at my role, the guy who showed up early and stayed late. They knew they could count on me, so they always did. But I was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. I felt like a man whose body had continued long after his soul clocked out. You ever feel like your own life is just a never-ending to-do list? That is where I was. Not depressed exactly, just hollowed out. So I took a sabbatical. Not a midlife crisis. Not a meltdown. I had planned for it, saved for it. I had mapped out a modest budget, given notice, and stacked 6 months to reassess, reset, realign. I wanted to breathe again. To think without the ticking clock of deadlines and Slack pings. To just be. I thought people would understand. But the reactions came fast and quiet. My buddy Jake said, "Man, must be nice," in that tone that always means the opposite. My cousin Darren, who never called me unless his fantasy team needed advice, messaged, "So what are you going to do all day? Watch YouTube?" With a laughing emoji. And my mom, "God," my mom said, "Well, I hope this little break doesn't become a habit." Nobody asked why. Nobody asked what led up to it. They just saw it as me quitting, stopping, falling behind. What they did not know, what I did not tell them, was that I had been waking up every morning with a pain in my chest. Not heartburn, not medical, just this heavy, constant pressure that said, "You cannot do this forever." And I believed it. So I stepped off the ride. 6 months, no career ladder, no LinkedIn updates, no hustle. Just time. I figured rest was a right. But I was about to learn that to a lot of people, it looked more like failure. And the first hit? That came from someone I never expected. Because on day 3 of my sabbatical, my father called. And what he said, that stayed with me for months. My father is not the emotional type. He is a contractor, old school, straight-line thinker. Believes in 2 things: hard work and keeping your mouth shut about how tired you are. So when I saw his name flash across my screen that Thursday afternoon, I figured it had to be something urgent. Maybe health-related. Maybe something with mom. But no. He started casual, asking if I had fixed the back fence yet. I had not. Then he moved to the point. "So what is this I hear about you taking a break?" I paused. I had not told him directly. Word must have traveled through the family chain. Maybe my sister. Maybe one of my uncles. I told him the truth. That I was taking 6 months to step back, figure things out, see what I actually wanted next. He was quiet for a second. Then I heard him shift in his chair. "You sick?" "No." "You get laid off?" "No." "Then what are you doing?" I explained it again, slower this time. I told him I had savings, a plan, that I had cleared it with work. I told him I was not running from anything. I was just tired of living in reaction mode. And then he laughed. That low, humorless kind of laugh. The kind that made me wish I had never picked up the call. He said, "Son, people like us do not get to go find ourselves. That is for rich kids and retired people. You are too young for one, too broke for the other." I wanted to push back, but I didn't. Not yet. Then he added the kicker. "I just hope you do not forget what real work looks like while you are out there chasing peace." That one stung. Because he was not yelling. He was not angry. He just sounded disappointed. Like I had let the whole bloodline down by not grinding myself into bone. He had worked every day of his life since age 16. I guessed to him, choosing rest looked like weakness. After we hung up, I sat on my porch for over an hour, just staring out at nothing. His words played over and over in my head. I tried to tell myself I did not care. But I did. A lot more than I wanted to admit. Because even though I had left the job behind, I had not left the mindset. That gnawing sense that if I was not producing something, I was wasting space. And for the first time, I started to wonder, had I made a mistake? That doubt stayed with me. Through the weekend. Into the next week. Until a stranger said something that shook my whole view. And it happened in the last place I expected to be, an empty library on a rainy Tuesday morning. It was raining hard that Tuesday. One of those gray, soaking days where even the dogs looked annoyed to be outside. I had not planned to go anywhere, but something in me said move. I grabbed my jacket and drove to the old public library near the edge of town, the one I used to visit as a kid when Mom needed a break from us. Place had not changed much. Still smelled like paper and dust, and maybe a little mildew. The lights were too bright for the gloom outside. I found a seat in the back corner, near the window, and pulled out a notebook I had been carrying around. Blank pages. Untouched. That was supposed to be part of the plan, reflection, journaling, all that. I stared at it for a good 10 minutes before I gave up and leaned back, watching the rain trail down the glass. That is when the guy sat down 2 chairs over. Looked to be in his 60s. Corduroy jacket, white hair, wire frame glasses. He had a stack of books and a travel mug that smelled like mint tea. I would not have noticed him if he had not glanced at me and said, "You are not retired, are you?" I blinked. "Excuse me. You are too young to be retired," he said, half smiling. "But you are not working either. I can tell by the way you were sitting. Like you were trying not to feel guilty." I kind of laughed, but it was more out of surprise than amusement. I asked him how he could possibly know that. He just said, "I did the same thing. Took a break. People hated it." We ended up talking for almost an hour. Turns out, he had been a project manager for a manufacturing firm. 32 years on the job, never took more than a long weekend. Then his wife died, and something inside him cracked. He walked in one day, handed over his badge, and took a year off. People thought he had lost his mind. He said something that stuck with me. "You know what scared people the most? Not that I quit, but that I was okay with it. That I looked calm. People do not like when you opt out of the game. Makes them question the rules." That hit me deep. Because that was exactly it. I was not failing. I was not spiraling. I was just still. And stillness made people uncomfortable. Like they needed me to be busy so they could feel okay about being busy too. He stood up eventually, nodded once, and said, "Do not waste this time trying to justify it. That defeats the point." And then he walked out. Just like that. I sat there for another half hour, staring at my notebook. Then I wrote 6 words. "You do not owe them speed." That was the first time I felt something shift. But peace does not come easy, especially when people start dropping by uninvited. And the next one? She brought more than just questions. She brought memories I had buried deep. It was Friday morning when Claire showed up. No call, no text, just the sound of knocking, 3 short raps, like she always did. I opened the door, and there she was, holding a coffee tray like it was a peace offering. Claire was my ex. We had not spoken in over a year. Not since we ended things quietly, like 2 people packing up after a movie they both pretended to enjoy. She stepped inside like it was still her place, handing me a coffee before I could say a word. "I heard you left your job," she said. I asked how she knew. "Your sister," she replied. "She called me. Said she was worried. Thought I should check on you since you're—" She trailed off, searching for the right word. Between things. Between things. Like I had misplaced my entire purpose and was just floating until someone handed it back. I did not say anything. Just sipped the coffee. It was exactly how I liked it. Still remembered, apparently. Claire sat on the edge of the couch and looked around. "So, what do you do all day now?" There it was. The question underneath every question. What do you do when you are not doing anything productive? How do you explain to people that rest is not laziness? That reflection is not retreat? I told her the truth. I woke up without an alarm. I took walks. I read more. I was learning to cook. I wrote a little. I thought a lot. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Sounds like early retirement. I almost snapped at that. Almost. But instead, I asked her why she really came. She looked down at her hands, picking at the sleeve of her sweater. "I do not know," she said. "Maybe I just miss talking to someone who was not always selling something." That hit me sideways. Claire had landed a big client recently. She was in branding, good at it. She lived in meetings and timelines now. She always talked about traction and momentum like they were air and water. We sat there in silence for a while, and then she asked it. "Do you regret it?" "No," I said. "Not yet." She nodded slowly. "People are talking, you know. About you. Wondering if you're okay. If you cracked." That made me laugh. I told her maybe I did crack. But what came out felt more like breaking open than breaking down. Claire stood up, brushing invisible dust off her jeans. "Just be careful," she said. "The world does not wait for people to find themselves." As she stepped out the door, she looked back once and said, "You always were brave. Just not in the ways people understood." Then she was gone. I stared at the closed door for a long time after that. She had meant it as a compliment, I think. But all I could hear was the warning buried inside it. Because it was true. The world was moving. And I was standing still. And somewhere in that stillness, something old was starting to surface. Something I had not faced in years. And it was coming for me next. You know how people say time heals everything? That is only true if you let it. Otherwise, time just covers things with dust. And if you sit still long enough, the wind will blow that dust right off, and you will see it all again. Mine came back on a Wednesday morning. I was in the middle of reorganizing my closet. Not for any real reason. Just trying to do something with my hands, so I did not feel the silence pressing in too hard. I opened an old shoebox I had not touched in years. Inside were photos, a flash drive, a torn envelope with no letter inside. But it was the brochure that caught me. Folded neatly, colors still sharp. The Whitmore School for Behavioral Growth. That place. I had not thought about it in so long I forgot I still had the pamphlet. It was the place my parents threatened to send me when I was 17, back when I could not sleep, could not focus, could not pretend everything was okay. I was not a troublemaker, but I was exhausted, angry, on edge all the time, and they hated that it made them look bad. Structure, they said. You need discipline. I never went. The threat was enough. But I remember sitting in my room, reading that brochure, wondering if I did need fixing. If my quiet was a flaw. If the way I processed pain, internally, slowly, meant something was broken. I folded the paper back up and sat on the edge of the bed. It hit me hard. This sabbatical was the first time in my life I had chosen stillness on my own terms. Not as punishment. Not as withdrawal. Not because someone told me I needed help. Because I finally understood that reflection is not retreat. That healing does not always come with applause. But even knowing that, I felt it creeping in, the fear. The fear that people were right. That while I was sitting here journaling and breathing and watching clouds, the rest of the world was stacking wins. Friends were getting promotions, buying second homes, posting shiny updates, everyone moving forward. And me? I was learning how to cook rice without burning it. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Not because I was anxious, because I had started to feel peace. And peace, real peace, is terrifying when you are not used to it. But the next day, I woke up and did something small. I planted a seed. Literally. One of those cheap herb kits from the hardware store. Basil, I think. I stuck it in the windowsill. Watered it. Watched the dirt. No fanfare. No productivity. Just patience. And right then, I started to understand something important. But I would not realize how deep that understanding went until I ran into someone from my past. Someone who once defined everything I thought I had to prove. And he did not recognize me. It happened at a gas station of all places. One of those moments where life just folds in on itself. I had driven out of town to clear my head. Nothing far, just a rural stretch of highway where the only sound was tires on gravel and the occasional hawks slicing through the sky. I stopped at this dusty little station to grab a bottle of water and stretch my legs. That is when I saw him. Mark Devlin. Same build. Same arrogant posture. The guy used to be my direct manager 5 years ago. Back when I was grinding 60-hour weeks trying to prove I was worth a seat at the table. He was the one who coined the phrase, keep climbing or get crushed, and he lived by it. Pressure was his favorite management tool. He rewarded burnout like it was loyalty. I remember the day he told me, nobody remembers the guy who pauses. They remember the one who wins. And I believed him. For years, I built my life around that lie. But here he was, 15 feet away, hunched at the counter arguing with the cashier about gas rewards. His hair was thinner, his gut was bigger, and his face? Tired, worn. He turned slightly, and for a second I froze. There was a chance he might recognize me. I braced myself for it. But he didn't. His eyes skimmed right past me like I was a stranger. It caught me off guard. I used to crave that man's approval. I used to measure my value by how many times he nodded in a meeting or included me in those late-night emails that always started with, "Need this ASAP." And now? Now I was invisible. I stepped outside, leaned against my car, and watched him drive off in a dented sedan with a missing hubcap. That man once defined the version of success I was killing myself to reach. And now he was just gone. A blip. A shadow. Not even a memory that he held anymore. It hit me hard. All those years I spent proving something, to him, to others, even to myself, were built on this idea that if I stopped moving, I would disappear. But here I was, standing still, breathing deeply, and realizing I was more myself now than I ever was back then. I thought about calling someone. My sister maybe. Or Jake. Telling them what just happened. But I didn't. Because that moment was not for them. It was for me. Later that night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the wind tug at the trees. There was no music. No phone buzzing. Just the soft creak of the wood beneath me and the hum of my own thoughts. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the difference. Not in my resume. Not in my wallet. But in the way my heart beat slower, steadier. Like it was starting to believe I was finally safe. Of course, peace never shows up without its twin. And the next morning? That is when the doubt came roaring back. Because an email showed up from work. And it was not what I expected. I woke up to the ping. You know the sound. The one that makes your chest tighten before you even roll over. It was from work. Subject line. Opportunity to return, discuss? I sat up in bed, staring at it like it was radioactive. My first instinct was to delete it. My second was to open it immediately. I read it 3 times. It was from the VP. Not my old manager, but higher up. Said they had been reevaluating resources and noticed the gap I left. That there might be a way for me to return, possibly in a more flexible, strategic role. They even called it a soft reentry. They did not mention title or pay. But the message was clear. I was being invited back in. Part of me lit up. The old part. The part that liked being wanted. That got a rush from being needed. Another part of me went cold. Because I knew what that world required. I had built my whole life around it. And it almost broke me. I closed the email. Stood up. Paced the kitchen for an hour. The truth? I missed the structure. I missed the clarity. Waking up with a goal already laid out for me. Deadlines. Status reports. People waiting for answers only I could give. There was power in that. But there was also weight. And I was finally starting to breathe again. Still, I could not shake the question. What if this was a test? What if all the peace and journaling and basil planting was just a luxury I bought with borrowed time? What if growth did not count unless it showed up as a bullet point on a resume? I called Jake. First time we had talked in weeks. Told him about the email. He laughed. Not mocking, more like tired amusement. Saw that coming, he said. So what now? You gonna go back? I told him I didn't know. He said, dude, you took time off. Cool. But the world keeps moving. There it was again. The reminder. The warning. You're falling behind. We hung up not long after. Nothing nasty, just quiet. I could feel the distance between us getting wider. Like the longer I stayed off the treadmill, the harder it was to talk to the ones still running on it. That night, I sat on my porch again. Same tea, same wind. And I realized something that cut deep. People would always frame rest as risk. Because rest does not produce proof. And if there is no proof, they assume you are losing. But I was not losing. I was changing. And change, real change, rarely comes with applause. Still, I knew what I had to do. I drafted a reply to the email. Then I stared at it. Because hitting send would mean turning around. And I had not come this far just to go back. I never sent the email. I drafted it. Sat with it. Rewrote it 5 times. But in the end, I closed the laptop and walked outside barefoot, letting the cool grass ground me. That was the moment I knew I was not going back. Not because I hated the job. Not because I wanted to prove a point. But because I had changed. And the version of me that once lived for performance reviews and late-night project fixes. He was not here anymore. I could not explain that to anyone. Not really. Because to the world, you are either rising or falling. Winning or wasting time. But they never asked the deeper question. Who are you becoming when no one is watching? It was a small moment that sealed it for me. That same week, I ran into my neighbor's kid, Noah. He is 10, smart, quiet, wears oversized hoodies and carries a sketch pad everywhere like it is armor. I had seen him around before, usually getting dragged to school half awake. But that afternoon, he was sitting on the curb, drawing the tree in my yard. He looked up and asked, "Do you work?" I hesitated. Then said, "Not right now." He just nodded. "Cool," he said. "That's probably good. You seem less tired than my dad." That hit me harder than anything my father or Claire or Jake ever said. Because it was true. I did seem less tired. Not because life got easier, but because I finally stopped running from myself. Noah asked if I wanted to see his drawing. I did. It was messy but real. Sharp branches, soft sky. He had even drawn a version of me on the porch, legs crossed, eyes closed. I asked why he put me there. He shrugged and said, "You look like someone who listens." That night, I wrote it down. You look like someone who listens. And for the first time, I understood what that time away had given me. Not rest, not clarity, not answers, but space. Space to become someone I actually liked. Someone who was not just reacting. Someone who could listen. To others, sure, but also to himself. And that was not failure. That was freedom. I went back inside, opened the email draft, and deleted it. Not with regret, with certainty. But that certainty would get tested. Because the very next day, my brother showed up, and he brought with him a choice I did not see coming. It had been months since I last saw my brother. We were never all that close, but we kept things civil. Dan was the classic firstborn, followed every rule, hit every milestone on schedule, married with 2 kids, mortgage, packed calendar. He wore his busyness like a badge. So when he knocked on my door unannounced, I knew it wasn't just a social visit. I opened the door, and there he was, polo shirt tucked in, Bluetooth earpiece still hanging from his ear like an extra limb. He got straight to it. "Dad told me what you're doing. Said you're on sabbatical." He said the word like it tasted wrong. I nodded and stepped aside. He walked in like he was inspecting a rental. He sat, looked around, and then said something that cut deep in a way only family knows how to do. "You know, this would have been fine if you were 23. But you're not. You're what, 38 now? You don't get sabbaticals. You get consequences." I took a breath, slow and even. He kept going. "I'm not trying to attack you. But Mom's worried. Jake's been talking." Even Claire reached out to Lisa. Lisa was his wife. Apparently, the entire network had been activated. Then he got to the point. He pulled out a folder from his bag. Contracts, printouts, schedules. "I need someone to help me manage a new property project. It's local, part-time, but with real output. Something you can put on a resume when this experiment ends." He said the word experiment like he was being generous. You'd be working again, earning, doing something that matters. Doing something that matters. That phrase echoed in my chest. Because I was doing something that mattered. It just didn't show up in bullet points or dollar signs. But I stayed quiet. I took the folder. I flipped through it. He talked on about timelines, investors, permits. None of it stuck. Then he hit me with it. "You take this, you're back on track. You don't. Well, you'll be explaining this little detour for years." There was a time I would have taken that offer on the spot, just to make the pressure stop, just to feel safe. But now I saw what it really was. A chance to step back into the old version of myself. The one who lived for deadlines and praise, not for meaning. I closed the folder slowly and looked him in the eye. "Dan," I said, "I know you think I've lost the thread. But for the first time in years, I'm not faking anything. I'm not numb. I'm not on autopilot." He looked at me like I was speaking a different language. "You don't understand now," I added. "Maybe you never will. But I'm not lost." He stood up, not angry, just disappointed. Like I had walked away from the only version of life he understood. Before he left, he said, "Call me when you're ready to rejoin the world." I watched him pull out of the driveway, his car already buzzing with calls before he turned the corner. That night, I sat with the folder in my lap. Then I tossed it into the fireplace. And as the pages curled and blackened, I felt something strange. Not victory, not defiance, but release. I was not rejoining that world. I was rebuilding my own. And it all came down to one final realization. A quiet truth I had been circling the whole time. There was no grand finale. No fireworks. No sudden breakthrough. Just a quiet Tuesday morning, sunlight bleeding through the blinds, the smell of coffee drifting through the house, and a moment that felt still enough to finally hear myself think. I stood at the kitchen sink, looking out over the backyard. The basil plant on the windowsill had started to sprout. Tiny green leaves, soft and stubborn, pushing through the dirt. I stared at them for a while. Not because they were miraculous, but because they grew anyway. No attention, no praise, no urgency. Just light, water, and time. And that is when it hit me. Growth does not always look like momentum. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Like silence. Like saying no when everyone expects yes. Like rest. Like choosing not to perform. even when the world demands a show. I had spent so much of my life trying to be seen by my bosses, by my father, by Claire, by every old version of myself that thought worth came from movement. But standing there, with no applause, no audience, no agenda, I finally understood something I had been circling for months. Time spent realigning is not time lost. I had not wasted these months. I had lived them. Fully. Quietly. Honestly. I was not building a resume. I was rebuilding me. That would not make sense to most people. Jake would still crack jokes. My dad would still shake his head. Dan would probably write me off entirely. But that was okay, because I was no longer living for their version of life. And in case you were wondering, no, I did not find all the answers. I still have moments of doubt. I still wake up some mornings and wonder if I am falling behind. But I breathe through it now, because I know where I stand. Not in comparison to others, but in connection with myself. The sabbatical ends soon. I do not know exactly what comes next. Maybe a new job. Maybe something totally different. But I do know this. I am not going back to the man I was. Because that man was always sprinting towards something that never arrived. Now, I am walking. Steady. Awake. And that is more than enough.